You are settling in now. Whatever the day carried, whatever weight found its way into your shoulders, your jaw, the small of your back, you can set it down. There is no need to carry it any further tonight. You are allowed to be still. Find the position that feels most like rest. Let your hands fall open if they are not already. Let your feet go soft. If your eyes are not yet closed, let them close now, slowly, without effort, the way a door drifts shut when the wind dies. There is nothing you need to see tonight. There is nothing you need to do or remember or solve. The only thing asked of you in this moment is to breathe. Breathe in slowly and out and again. In a little while, I am going to take you somewhere. It is a quiet place, a warm place, far below the surface of the world, where the air smells of salt and stone and old beeswax, and where the only sounds are the sounds things make when they have been given all the time they need. There is no urgency there, no clock that matters. There is only the long, patient dark and the soft amber light of lamps and the occasional voice of a bell, a single fading note rising into warm stone and slowly, slowly dissolving. You do not need to do anything to get there. You only need to follow the sound of my voice and let the world around you grow a little more distant with each breath. The ceiling above you is becoming stone, curved stone, the color of cream and pale honey, threaded with veins of something that glows very faintly, a mineral light, soft as the inside of a shell. The air is warm. The air smells faintly of salt, ancient salt, the kind that has been sleeping in rock for 10,000 years, and beneath that, the round, golden smell of beeswax warming near a flame. You are going down, slowly, gently, down into the hollow Meridian. The stairway that brought you here is already behind you, already forgotten, a long descent of shallow stone steps, each one worn smooth at the center by the passage of careful feet, each one a little warmer than the last as the rock closed overhead and the world above receded into something theoretical, something that hardly seemed relevant anymore. You descended for a long time, or perhaps for a short time. It is difficult to say because the quality of the air changed gradually and your attention shifted gradually, and at some point the only thing that existed was the next step and the warmth and the faint smell of salt. And then the stairway opened and you were here. Here is a cavern, the first of many, though you do not know that yet. It is perhaps the size of a large room, though its ceiling arches high above you, higher than the lamplight quite reaches, so that the upper dark is soft and indefinite, like the inside of a closed eye. The walls curve inward and outward in the way that stone walls do when they have been shaped by water and time rather than by tools, not flat, not smooth in the way that cut stone is smooth but polished in long gradual sweeps, like the inside of a bowl that has been turned by a very slow and very patient hand. And threading through those walls in long diagonal veins and occasional branching clusters is the selenite, pale gold, pale white, faintly luminous, not bright enough to read by, but bright enough to know it is there, bright enough to give the stone a quality of warmth even where the lamps do not reach. The lamps themselves are small. Iron-based with amber glass, they sit on ledges carved into the rock at intervals, casting their light in low, rounded pools that just touch each other so that the whole cavern is held in a continuous amber glow, not bright, not harsh, but even and warm and steady, the way firelight is steady when there is no wind. The shadows are soft. There are no sharp edges anywhere in this light. You stand for a moment and simply breathe. The air here is not still. It moves slowly in the way that underground air always moves, following gradients of temperature and pressure through passages and corridors that you cannot see from where you stand. It moves against your face like a breath, not cold, not warm, simply present, and it carries with it that faint saline quality, that ancient mineral dryness that is not quite a smell and not quite a taste, but something between the two, something that you feel at the back of your throat and the roof of your mouth. Salt, stone, and beneath those, something else, the warm, round, golden scent of beeswax and mineral oil, barely there, a suggestion, a memory of warmth. And then you hear it. Somewhere in the middle distance, somewhere beyond the first cavern, beyond a low archway that leads deeper into the rock, a bell sounds. A single note, low and clear, the kind of note that seems to arrive not through the air, but through the stone itself, through the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands. It rises, reaches its full voice in an instant, clean and round, and then it begins to fade. Slowly, so slowly. The note stretches out into the warm dark, growing thinner and thinner, like a thread being drawn through fine cloth until you are not quite sure whether you are still hearing it or simply remembering it. And then it is gone, or almost gone. There is a quality to the silence that follows a bell, a fullness, a resonance, as though the air has been changed by the sound and has not quite returned to what it was. You stand in that quality of silence, and you breathe. Ahead of you, through the low archway, a lamp flickers, a warm movement of amber light on curved stone, and you move toward it. Your footsteps are quiet on the stone floor, which is smooth and slightly warm, as though the rock remembers the heat it has stored from some ancient source deep below. You pass through the archway, ducking your head slightly though there is room, and you enter the first of the bell corridors. It is longer than you expected, a passage that curves gently to the left, wide enough for two people to walk side by side, its ceiling arching just above reach. And along both walls, set into niches carved at varying heights into the stone, and hanging from iron brackets fixed into the ceiling, and resting on low stone shelves that run the length of the passage like a long, continuous sill. Bells. So many bells. Your eyes move over them slowly, the way your eyes move over things when you are not looking for anything in particular, when you are simply receiving what is there. They are all different. There are large bells, great bronze things dark with age, their surfaces traced with patterns of vine and letter and symbol in the way that old bells are often decorated, as though the people who cast them wanted to give them something beautiful to wear for the long centuries ahead. And there are small bells, hand bells, desk bells, the kind of bell that sat on a counter and was struck once lightly to signal arrival or need. There are bells with elaborate yokes and bells that hang from simple hooks. There are bells whose metal has gone green with age and bells whose surfaces are still warm bright, still carrying the color of the copper or brass or bronze from which they were made. Each one rests in its niche or hangs from its bracket in a particular stillness, the stillness of things that have been placed with care by hands that understood their weight and their meaning. You walk slowly between them. The underground air moves through the corridor in a slow, continuous drift, and as it passes, it finds the bells, touches their clappers, stirs the air inside their mouths, and occasionally, very occasionally, one of them speaks. A single note, brief and clear, rising from some large bronze bell near the ceiling, a note that is low and round and full, that spreads through the stone and the air and the bodies of all the other bells in the corridor, so that for a moment you can feel something vibrating in the walls, in the floor, in the space behind your sternum. And then it fades. that long, patient, inevitable fade, the note thinning into the warm dark, becoming part of the silence, becoming part of the quality of the air. You pause and press your fingertips against the wall. The selenite is granular under your touch, not rough exactly, but textured in a way that is somehow satisfying, each tiny crystal catching your fingerprint in a slightly different way. The stone is warm, not uncomfortably warm, simply warm, the way a stone is warm after a long day of sun, except that here there is no sun, and the warmth comes from somewhere much deeper and much older. You hold your hand flat against the wall and feel the warmth spreading into your palm, into your fingers, into the bones of your hand. And somewhere further along the corridor, a drop of groundwater falls from the ceiling and strikes the stone floor. The sound it makes is small and clear, a single tap like a fingernail against glass, and it echoes once, twice, fading. And then silence. And then, after a long pause, another drop. Another tap, another slow echo fading into the dark. You continue walking. The corridor opens gradually into a wider space, a second cavern, larger than the first, its ceiling lost entirely in the upper dark. This is the Great Hall of the Meridian, though no one has given it that name. It simply is what it is, the largest of the connected chambers, the one where the biggest bells have been brought to rest. They hang from the ceiling here on chains and cables of old iron, some of them so large that you could step inside them, so large that their clappers are the size of a child. They hang at different heights, at different distances from each other, in the loose arrangement of things that have been added over a long period of time, each one placed where there was room, where the ceiling offered a suitable anchor. The effect is extraordinary. When you look up, you see them ranged above you in the amber lamplight, dark shapes, some of them, the largest ones barely visible against the upper dark, their surfaces catching just enough light to define their curves, their shoulders, the long downward sweep of their mouths. And the smaller ones are lit more fully, their patina visible to you from below, the green and brown and warm copper gold, the occasional inscription worn almost smooth by age in the long passage of time. You stand in the center of the hall and look up at them for a while. The air moves here too. There is always that slow underground breath in the Meridian, and the bells sway very slightly, almost imperceptibly, on their chains. As they sway, they sometimes touch the air inside themselves just enough to produce a sound, not a full note, but something quieter than that, something that is more a suggestion of a note, a trembling at the edge of hearing. And occasionally one of the larger bells finds some resonance with the stone around it and releases a note that is not so much heard as felt, a low, slow vibration that passes through the floor and up through your feet and into your legs and your chest and your shoulders, a sound that your body understands before your ears quite register it. You breathe in, you breathe out. The air in the great hall smells more strongly of the ancient seabed here, that dry saline quality, the mineral ghost of an inland ocean that was young when the world was still learning what it was. You can smell the stone too, a cool, clean smell, the smell of rock that has been dark and undisturbed for a very long time. And somewhere beneath all of that, threaded through everything, the warm golden scent of beeswax and mineral oil. You follow that scent. It leads you to a work table near the far wall, a long table of pale stone, its surface worn smooth and slightly concave from years of careful work, lit by 2 lamps on either side that cast their amber light in overlapping pools across the whole length of it. On the table, a cloth folded neatly. A small glass bottle stopped with a cork, containing a liquid that is pale amber in the lamplight, mineral oil mixed with a little beeswax dissolved in warmth, the mixture used to clean and condition old metal, to lift the tarnish without removing the patina, to leave the surface clean and faintly gleaming without making it look new, because these bells should not look new. They should look like what they are, which is old and rested and cared for. And on the table, beside the cloth and the bottle, sitting in a small cradle of folded chamois leather, a bell, small, copper. A handbell, the kind that would have been carried in a hand and rung with a wrist motion, its clapper worn smooth at the tip from decades of striking, worn smooth in the particular way that a clapper wears when it has been swung not by machinery but by the small, repetitive, patient motion of a human wrist. The surface of the bell is not bright. It is the color of old copper, which is not quite orange and not quite brown, but something between the two, a warm, muted tone that seems to hold light rather than reflect it. And there are places where the verdigris has settled into the engraved lines along the bell's shoulder, faint decorative lines almost worn away that were once a pattern of waves. Waves. You think about that for a moment, a bell decorated with waves, from a coastal village and now brought here to rest beneath a dried sea. There is something right about that, something patient and appropriate, the way things are when they have found their proper place. You sit down on the stool behind the table. You lift the bell from its chamois cradle with both hands, and the weight of it settles into your palms, cool at first, the cool of copper that has been resting in still air, a pleasant mineral weight that is neither heavy nor light but simply present, simply itself. You hold it for a moment without doing anything, just hold it, feeling the weight of it, the curve of it, the way the metal has the particular density of old cast copper, denser than it looks, more substantial than something this size seems like it should be. Your thumbs find the engraved wave pattern along the shoulder of the bell. You can feel it, barely, the lines worn almost smooth but still present, still traceable under a careful thumb. A small pattern of repeated waves, the kind of pattern that means the sea, that has always meant the sea, in every culture that has ever lived beside one. You trace the pattern slowly, back and forth, the granular warmth of old copper under your thumb. After a while, you set the bell back in its cradle and uncork the small glass bottle. The smell of the beeswax mixture rises immediately, warm and golden and round, that smell that is somehow both clean and rich at the same time, the smell of something old and good being maintained with care. You pour a small amount onto the cloth, just a little, just enough to dampen a section of it, and then you begin to clean the bell. The motion is slow and careful, long strokes following the curve of the bell's surface from shoulder to mouth, from the narrow top down to the wide open bottom. The cloth moves in the lamplight and the oil leaves the metal faintly gleaming in its wake, not bright, not polished to a mirror finish, but clean, the warm copper tone coming clearer as the surface dust and the accumulated dimness of travel lifts away. You can see the bell more clearly now. You can see where the metal is thinnest, near the mouth, where the sound comes out, the edge worn slightly uneven by years of use, by the particular way this bell was struck, by the particular strength and angle of the wrist that held it. You work slowly. There is no hurry here. There has never been any hurry in the Meridian. The lamp on your left gutters very slightly, a brief quiet trembling of the flame, and the shadows in the great hall shift and settle, and somewhere above you in the dark, one of the hanging bells is stirred by the movement of air and releases a single low note that moves through the stone beneath your feet like a slow wave. You feel it in your hands. You feel it in your chest. The note rises and reaches and fades, that long, inevitable fade, the sound thinning and thinning until it is gone and the silence is full again, full and warm and resonant. You continue cleaning the bell. The cloth moves in long strokes. The beeswax smell rises warm in the lamplight. The stone walls glow faintly at the edges of the light, the selenite veins catching the amber and returning it softened, diffused. Somewhere in the corridor behind you, a drop of groundwater falls, and its tap and echo travel through the quiet. And then silence again. And then, after a long pause, another drop. When the bell is clean, when every part of its surface has been attended to, when the cloth has done its patient work, and the copper is as clear and warm as it can be, you set the cloth aside and take up the ledger. The ledger is old. Not as old as some of the bells, but old enough that its cover has softened and darkened, and its pages have the particular quality of vellum that has been turned many times, a slight translucency at the edges, a smoothness that is different from the smoothness of new paper, a smoothness that comes from the repeated passage of careful hands. You open it to the next blank page, and the spine gives a soft creak, a familiar sound, a comfortable sound, the sound of a well-made thing accommodating itself to use. The page is pale and slightly warm under your hand. You write slowly, in the way that this kind of work requires. There is no urgency in the recording of a bell's history. You write what you know: copper handbell, provenance a coastal village, the name of which is no longer certain, the village gone these several years, lost to the sea in the patient way that coastal villages sometimes are, reclaimed gradually, stone by stone and season by season, until one winter there was simply nothing left that could be called a village, and the people had long since moved elsewhere, and the bell had made its way here by the usual slow routes, passed from hand to hand, stored in a warehouse, donated to a collector, donated again. You write what you can hear in the bell, or rather, what you could hear if you were to strike it, which you may do later when you have brought it to its niche, when the time is right. You write the condition of the clapper, the condition of the yoke, the measurements in the careful notation that the Meridian uses, a system of marks and numbers developed over a very long time by the people who have kept this place. The vellum page accepts the writing quietly. The pen moves in the lamplight, and the shadows of your hand move across the page, and the bell sits in its chamois cradle beside you, gleaming faintly, patient. You write for a while. Not long, there is only so much to record, and the rest will come later after you have found the bell's tone, after you have listened to it properly and let it tell you what it knows. The essentials are there now: the provenance, the condition, the date of arrival. You close the ledger, and it sighs softly as the pages settle together, a breath of warm vellum air. You sit for a moment with your hands resting on the cover. The great hall is quiet around you. The lamps burn steadily. The bells hang in the upper dark, patient and still. The air moves its slow underground movement, and somewhere a bell trembles almost imperceptibly, and somewhere a drop of water falls in a distant corridor, and the selenite in the walls glows its faint, warm glow. You lift the small copper bell from its cradle, and you stand. The niches are in the side corridors, long passages that branch off the great hall and the connecting passages between chambers, each niche carved into the wall at a comfortable height, each one slightly different in size and shape because they were carved by different hands over a long period of time, each one intended for a specific bell or a specific kind of bell. You know the Meridian well enough to know where to look. You have walked these corridors many times in the amber lamplight with a bell in your hands, looking for the place that feels right, and you have learned that this is not a mystical process, not a matter of intuition so much as a matter of attention, of noticing the qualities of a niche and the qualities of a bell and understanding when they correspond. The right niche for this bell will be at a medium height, in a corridor where the air moves gently, where the temperature is even, where the stone is the right kind of stone to hold the resonance of copper without absorbing it entirely. You know roughly where to look. You carry the bell through the great hall, past the hanging shapes in the upper dark, past the work table with its folded cloth and its small glass bottle, past the ledger resting on its shelf. Your footsteps are quiet on the warm stone. The bell rests in both hands, the cool mineral weight of it, the curve of it against your palms. You pass through an archway into a narrower corridor, this one running roughly north, or what would be north if you were above ground and had a sky to orient by. The walls here are closer together, the ceiling lower, and the selenite veins more numerous, so that the corridor glows more brightly than the main passages, a warm, even mineral light that is almost sufficient on its own, though the lamps are still here, still burning their amber flames in their iron and glass housings. The bells in this corridor are smaller than the ones in the great hall. They are the bells of intimate spaces, of offices and parlors and hotel desks, of sick rooms and school rooms and chapels too small to hold a tower bell. And they are the bells that were rung by hand or by the pull of a cord or by the trigger of a mechanism small enough to sit on a tabletop. They rest in their niches with the particular stillness of small things that have had a great deal of use, not worn out, not exhausted, but finished, completed, ready to rest. You walk slowly between them, the copper bell in your hands. The air in this corridor moves differently, a little slower, a little warmer, with a quality of stillness at its center that is different from the stillness of the great hall. More intimate here. The lamps are closer to eye level, and their light catches the bells more directly, so that you can see the faces of them more clearly, the particular color and texture of each one, the way age has treated each surface differently. Here is a small brass bell with a handle of turned ivory, yellowed now, the ivory cracked in one place along a seam, a desk bell almost certainly, the kind that sat on a counter and was struck with a palm. Here is a cluster of 3 small copper bells on a shared yoke, the kind that might have hung above a shop door, connected so that they rang together whenever the door was opened, 3 notes instead of 1, a chord of arrival. Here is a bell of dark bronze with no visible decoration, severe and plain, its clapper heavy for its size, a bell that was used to mark time, to divide a day into portions, to tell people when to begin and when to stop. You pause beside each one for a moment, not long, just long enough to acknowledge them, to notice them, to let them be present in your attention. This is part of the work, not the cataloging, not the cleaning, but the simple act of noticing, of being present among them, of letting the Meridian know that someone is paying attention. The air shifts slightly, and somewhere in the corridor a small bell stirs, one of the shop door bells perhaps, or one of the desk bells trembling in its niche, and a note rises. Small and clear, higher in pitch than the great hall bells, bright and brief and sweet, reaching its peak almost immediately and then beginning its fade. But even a small bell has a sustain, and even this quick, clear note stretches out into the warm stone for longer than you might expect, thinning and thinning, becoming a whisper, becoming a quality of the air. And then it is gone. You continue walking. The niche you are looking for is near the end of the corridor, on the right side, at about the height of your heart. You know it when you see it, a niche carved slightly wider than its neighbors, with a curved back wall that follows the grain of the stone, and a floor that is smooth and slightly concave, as though it has been waiting to hold something round. The selenite vein nearest to it runs diagonally across the back of the niche, so that when a bell is placed there, it will rest against a background of faint mineral glow, pale gold, pale white, the stone's own patient light. You hold the copper bell up and look at it in the lamplight for a moment. The wave pattern on its shoulder is just visible in the amber glow, those almost worn-away lines, that ancient gesture toward the sea. The surface is clean now, warm and matte, the color of old copper that has been cared for. The clapper hangs inside, still, its worn tip just touching the inner wall of the bell's mouth. You think about the village. A village on a coast somewhere, a village of perhaps a few hundred people, or perhaps fewer, the kind of village where a bell like this would have been carried by the person whose job it was to make announcements, to call people to the square, to mark the beginning of a market day or the end of a festival. Or perhaps it was kept in a building, a small hall, a community room, and rung to signal that a meeting was beginning, that people should come together. You do not know. The records are incomplete, as records so often are, but you know the bell, its weight and its shape, and the way the metal has worn, and you can imagine the hands that held it, the wrist motions that swung it, the particular way the sound of it would have spread across a small coastal square on a clear morning, with the sea nearby and the salt air carrying the note out over the water. You place the bell in the niche. It settles into the curved stone floor with a soft, solid sound, not quite a ring, just the quiet impact of copper on stone, a contact sound, a placed sound, and then it is still. You step back and look at it for a moment. It looks right there. It looks as though it has always been there, or as though it was always going to be there, the copper warm against the stone, the selenite vein glowing faintly behind it, the lamplight from the corridor catching the curve of its shoulder and the small engraved waves. You stand quietly for a moment, just looking. Then you reach out and very gently with one fingertip you touch the bell's shoulder. It swings the smallest amount, barely at all, and the clapper moves inside it, and there is a sound, small, clear. The note of this bell, copper, hand-cast, decades old, from a coastal village that is gone, rises into the corridor of the Meridian and finds the stone and the air and the other bells in their niches, and it spreads, very gently, outward. And then it fades, that long, patient, inevitable fade. The note thinning and softening, becoming part of the warm air, becoming part of the mineral hum that the stone carries always, becoming part of the meridian. You listen to it fade, all the way to the end, until you cannot hear it anymore, until the silence is full again. You turn and walk back through the corridor, past the small bells in their niches, past the lamplight pooling on curved stone, past the selenite veins in their slow, warm glow. Your footsteps are quiet. Your hands are empty now. The bell is placed, the ledger is written, the cloth is folded, and the bottle is stopped. The evening's work is done. You pass through the archway into the great hall, and the space opens around you, the ceiling receding into the upper dark, the great bells hanging on their chains above, the lamps burning their steady amber flames. The air here is a little cooler than in the side corridor, a little more spacious, and it carries the full mineral smell of the ancient seabed, that dry saline quality, that ghost of an ocean that has been waiting in the stone for 10,000 years. You cross the hall slowly. One of the great bells above you, a large bronze bell dark with age, its surface barely visible against the upper dark, stirs in the moving air and releases a note. Low and full and round, a note that begins not in the air but in the stone, that you feel before you hear it, moving through the floor and up through your feet and into your legs and your torso and your chest. The note rises to its full voice, a voice that is not loud exactly but large, a sound that occupies the space completely, that fills the great hall from floor to ceiling without effort, and then it begins to fade. Slowly, so slowly. the note fading in the way that only a large bell fades, the fundamental tone dropping away first, leaving the overtones to continue a little longer, so that as the sound diminishes, it also changes, becomes more layered, a chord of fading harmonics, and then those two are gone, one by one, until the last one, a high, thin, barely there vibration, dissolves into the warm air and the silence closes again. You stand in the silence for a moment. Then you continue across the hall, toward the far side, toward the passage that leads to the heart of the Meridian. The heart of the Meridian is a smaller chamber, not small, but smaller than the Great Hall, more enclosed, more intimate. Its ceiling is lower here, and the selenite veins are densest here, running in long parallel lines across the ceiling like the fingers of a large patient hand, so that the chamber glows from above with a soft, even mineral light that is independent of the lamps. The lamps are here too, of course, but their contribution is supplementary, additional warmth added to the warmth the stone provides on its own. At the center of the chamber, a small iron stove. It is old in the way that things in the Meridian are old, which is to say that it has been here long enough to have become part of the space, to have settled into the stone floor with a permanence that makes it feel geological, as though it grew here rather than being carried in and set down. Its iron is dark with years of use, its surface radiating a warmth that you can feel from several steps away, a dry, even heat, not hot, not blazing, but steady and reliable, the warmth of a fire that has been tended for a long time by careful hands. The stove's door is closed, but a thin line of orange light shows at its seam, and the occasional small sound of settling wood comes from inside. A soft creak, a brief hiss, the patient voice of burning. Beside the stove, a low chair. Plain wood and woven reed, worn smooth at the arms and the seat from long use, set at an angle that faces both the stove and the larger part of the chamber, so that whoever sits in it can feel the warmth on one side and look out at the space on the other. A small table beside the chair holds a cup, ceramic, plain, the glaze a warm cream color, and a small iron kettle sitting on a trivet, its lid just slightly ajar so that a thin thread of steam rises from it into the lamplight. The smell of the tea reaches you before you reach the stove. Saltgrass tea, brewed from the dried stems and leaves of a grass that grows in the shallow margins of what were once salt flats, a grass that has adapted over centuries to the mineral-rich soil of ancient seabeds, carrying in its dried form a smell that is green and slightly saline, slightly mineral, slightly sweet in a dry, quiet way. Not a rich sweetness, not honey, not fruit, but the sweetness of something simple and clean, the sweetness of warm water carrying a gentle flavor. The smell of it fills the chamber, mingles with the beeswax and mineral oil that has been part of the air all evening, mingles with the ancient salt of the stone and the warm iron smell of the stove. You sit down in the low chair. The chair receives you. That is the right word for it, receives, because it has been sat in so many times that it has learned the shape of a person sitting in it, has accommodated itself to the particular angles and weights of human rest, and when you settle into it, it settles around you with a quiet rightness, a fit that does not require adjustment. Your back finds the back of the chair, your arms find the arms, your feet find the floor. You lean forward and pour the tea. The kettle is not heavy, just warm, the iron radiating the heat of the stove into your hand as you pour, and the tea falls into the cup in a thin, steady stream, pale amber in the lamplight, carrying a thread of steam that rises and curls and dissipates in the warm air of the chamber. You set the kettle back on its trivet and take the cup in both hands. The warmth of it spreads through your palms immediately. The cup is not too hot, it is the temperature of something that has been poured from a kettle that was not quite at a full boil, the right temperature for a tea that is meant to be drunk slowly, that is meant to be held and warmed by and sipped over time. You wrap both hands around it and feel the warmth moving into your fingers, into your knuckles, into the small bones of your hands. You bring the cup close and breathe in the steam before you drink. Salt grass and warm water, green and mineral and faintly sweet. The steam is warm on your face. You take the first sip. It is gentle on the tongue, mild, the flavor quiet and steady, not demanding attention, not insisting on itself, simply present. There is the faint mineral quality of the salt grass, the way it carries a suggestion of the ancient seabed in its dried fibers, and there is the warmth of the water moving down through your chest, and there is the particular comfort of holding a warm cup in both hands in a warm room while the world outside, above, far above, through hundreds of feet of stone, does whatever it is doing, which is none of your concern right now. You sip again, slowly. The stove ticks softly as the iron expands and settles in the heat. The lamps burn their steady amber flames. The selenite veins in the ceiling glow their pale, warm mineral glow. The air moves its slow underground movement, and somewhere in the corridors beyond this chamber, a bell is stirred and releases a single note, low and round and patient, that travels through the stone and arrives here diminished but present, a vibration felt more than heard, a reminder that the Meridian is full of voices, all of them speaking at their own pace, in their own time, none of them in a hurry. But you hold your cup and you listen. The Meridian settles around you. That is what it does at this hour, settles, the way a large house settles at night, the way stone settles when the temperature is stable and the air is still, small adjustments, small sounds, the patient accommodation of old materials to the slow passage of time. The sounds it makes are not alarming. They are the sounds of presence, of mass, of a place that is very much there and very much itself. A faint creak from somewhere in the upper dark of the great hall, one of the chains from which a bell hangs, expanding or contracting by a fraction of a degree. The distant tap of a water drop in a far corridor. The soft settling of wood in the stove. And the bells, always the bells, occasionally at long intervals releasing their single notes into the warm air, notes that travel through the stone and arrive here as vibrations in the floor, in the walls, in the warm ceramic of the cup in your hands. You take another sip of tea. The warmth of it spreads through your chest. Your shoulders, which have been carrying the slight tension that shoulders always carry, release a little, not all at once but gradually, in the way that warmth works, in the way that a body responds to a warm room and a warm cup, and the absence of any reason to remain tense. Your jaw loosens. The muscles behind your eyes, which have been working all day without your noticing, go soft. You look at the stove. The thin line of orange light at its seam pulses very slightly with each small movement of the fire inside, a slow, irregular pulse, nothing like a clock, nothing like a mechanism, simply the natural rhythm of combustion, of wood becoming heat and light and ash in its own patient way. You watch the pulse for a while. It is not a demanding thing, simply there, a small, warm presence in the warm room, a reminder that something is burning slowly and steadily and without urgency. The cup in your hands is lighter now. You have drunk most of the tea. You finish it in one last slow sip, and you set the cup on the small table beside you, and you lean back in the chair. The chair receives you again, deeper this time, more fully. Your back settles against the woven reed. Your arms rest along the worn wood. Your legs are loose, your feet flat on the warm stone floor. Your eyes are still open, just barely, just enough to see the amber light on the curved ceiling, the selenite veins glowing their pale, warm glow, the thin line of orange at the stove seam. The Meridian breathes around you. That is what it feels like, a breath, slow and enormous, the breath of a place rather than a person, the slow exchange of warm air through corridors and chambers and passages, the movement of something vast and patient and unhurried. You breathe with it, or it breathes with you. It is difficult to say which, at this hour in this chair, with the warmth of the tea still moving through your chest, in and out. Somewhere in the great hall, a large bell finds the air and speaks, low, round, full, a note that is more vibration than sound, moving through the stone and arriving here as a warmth in the floor beneath your feet, a resonance in the chair beneath you. It rises, it sustains, it begins very slowly to fade. You listen to it fade, all the way to the end, until the last overtone has dissolved into the warm air and the silence is complete again, and then you simply sit in the silence that follows a bell, in the fullness of it. After a while, you do not know how long, you rise from the chair, slowly, without urgency, and you move to the last lamp. The lamp nearest the stove, the one that has been burning longest, its amber flame steady and low. You reach out and turn it down, not all the way, not yet, just enough that the chamber grows a shade darker, that the shadows deepen slightly in the corners and along the floor, that the selenite veins in the ceiling become relatively brighter, the mineral glow more present in the diminished lamplight. The chamber is quieter in this dimmer light. Not actually quieter, the sounds are the same, the stove and the bells and the distant water and the slow breath of the air, but the quality of the space has changed slightly, become more enclosed, more interior, more like the inside of something rather than the outside, more like rest. You sit back down in the chair, the stove is warm beside you, the selenite glows above you. The bells are present in the dark beyond the chamber, in their corridors and niches and hanging places, each one resting in its particular stillness, each one occasionally speaking a single note into the warm underground air. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyes is warm. It is the darkness of a closed room, not the darkness of the open night, a contained darkness, a held darkness. The darkness that exists inside warmth and safety, and the knowledge that there is nothing that needs doing. It is the color, almost, of the inside of a copper bell, that warm, muted, reddish dark. You breathe in. The air smells of beeswax and mineral oil, of salt and stone, of salt grass tea fading now, a memory of warmth in the air, of iron warm from the stove, of the particular mineral sweetness of the selenite, which has its own smell, very faint, almost nothing, but present, the smell of old crystal, old light trapped in stone. You breathe out. The stove ticks once, softly. Somewhere far away, a bell, low, round, fading. The chair is warm beneath you. The warmth of the stove is on your left side, a steady, even warmth, not hot, just present, just there, the warmth of a fire that has been burning for a long time and will go on burning quietly without your attention. Your hands are resting in your lap, your shoulders are down, your jaw is loose. The meridian settles, a sound from somewhere, a bell, small, clear, a note that rises and is already fading before it has quite arrived. A tap of water in a far corridor, the soft creak of a chain, then nothing, The darkness behind your eyes is very warm now, very soft. The edges of things are dissolving, not frightening, not disorienting, simply relaxing, the way the edges of things dissolve when you are very tired and very comfortable, and there is no reason to hold them sharp. The room around you is still there. The stove is still warm. The bells are still in their niches, resting, patient, occasionally speaking their single notes into the warm dark. But they are a little further away now. Everything is a little further away. You are still here. You are in the low chair, in the warm chamber, in the heart of the hollow Meridian, beneath the salt flats of a sea that has been sleeping for 10,000 years. The stone is warm, the lamps are low, the bells are resting, and you are resting too. A bell somewhere, very far, very low, fading, the beeswax smell, warm, golden, the selenite glow above you, soft and pale, the warmth of the stove, the slow underground breath of the air, a bell, fading, the warm dark, the bells are resting, and so are you. The Meridian breathes,